We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello, you found the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're headed to the Big House to watch Girls in Prison from 1956.
Girls in Prison was directed by Edward L. Cahn, written by Lou Rusoff, and produced by Alex Gordon for Golden State Pictures.
Girls in Prison stars Richard Denning as Reverend Fulton, Joan Taylor as Ann Carson, Adele Jergens as Jenny, Helen Gilbert as Melanee, Lance Fuller as Paul Anderson, Jane Darwell as Matron Jamieson, Raymond Hatton as Pop Carson, Phyllis Coates as Dorothy, Diana Darrin as Meg, the short redhead, Mae Marsh as Grandma Edwards, Laurie Mitchell as Phyllis, the tall blonde.
Also appearing are Luana Walters as the cell block guard, Reza Royce as party chaperone guard, Lottie Salisbury as pianist at party, although that title is dubious as she has several other jobs in this film, Edmund Cobb as the work gang guard, Jean Evans as the new girl in the laundry, a.k.a. the stoolie, Mary Finley as Mary, Diane Richards as the nightclub singer, and Kermit Maynard as prison guard.
Girls in Prison starts with an insistent drum beat and a woman bent over, her hair dangling down. She flips her hair back and starts singing Tom's Beat. This is Diane Richards, as we just mentioned.
Can't you feel the beat?
I can, and it's Tom's Beat. A waiter opens the door to the restaurant, looks to his left and his right, and he clocks two plainclothes cops flanking the Starlit Grill entrance. He goes to report this to an organized crime type guy dining with his date.
This guy goes out to see for himself, and confirming that there are policemen outside, he goes back inside and hands his revolver to the waiter/bartender. Then he sits back at his table. A woman comes into the club. The man seems distressed by her presence, and he motions for her to get out of there. The woman is determined to speak with him. She just can't seem to navigate the floor of people bopping to Tom's Beat.
The police have followed the woman in, and before she can figure out how to walk around a small cluster of people in the center of a dance floor, she's arrested. The man at the table sees this and gloats, and that's the end of Tom's Beat. And the cold open.
After the credits, the film continues post-trial, and the woman, Ann Carson, is escorted into the prison.
They pass a strange older woman who curtsies to welcome her to Madam Something or Other's finishing school for ladies.
This is the pianist that we referred to earlier, who has several small parts within the film that have nothing to do with the piano.
All of them are annoying, too.
Ann Carson is escorted in to see the prison matron, Matron Jamieson. The matron is looking over her record. Carson Ann, age 21, charged with conspiracy, armed bank robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon. Reverend Fulton is standing in the room, and he looks over the newcomer.
Boy, does he ever.
I didn't do it, says Ann. I wasn't guilty. I'll go by what the record says the matron. Tried in Superior Court, Los Angeles, found guilty of all charges.
Well, duh, she wouldn't be there. Ann says that no one would listen to her during the trial. Well, I think they listened. They just didn't believe her.
Reverend Fulton tells her not to worry. When they have a chance later, they'll talk. Talk? Exclaims Ann. I've had all the talk I could stand. Psychiatrists, lawyers. They all talk, but no one would listen.
Matron Jamieson gives Ann some advice. Don't tell anyone where she's from or what she did. Ann nods, and the waitress asks the female guard to take her away to her cell. After Ann is gone, the matron opines that all prisoners claim innocence and then have the audacity to want the benefit of the doubt at parole hearings. An old trick, carps the cynical old matron.
But the Reverend didn't get that impression at all. What he saw was a trapped, frightened girl reaching out for someone to believe her. He'd like to read her case history, and the matron thinks that's a good idea. Then he'll see how innocent she truly is. Then the matron looks like she's noticing the Reverend for the first time. She says he's too good looking and athletic to be a Reverend.
Well, actually, the Reverend says that he did box a bit in the Navy. So put a pin in that one. And then the matron dreamily wishes they'd sent a 50-something priest with ulcers. No kink shaming, but ew. Actually, she wants to work with another sour old cynic like herself. Reverend Fulton said that he requested this assignment, and matron is aghast. Why? Well, Reverend Fulton explains, he was a reckless youth himself, And he could have ended up in a women's prison like Anne did, had he not found something to believe in.
Next, we see Anne being escorted to her cell, and there she meets her new roomies. Melanee is the first to greet her. "Say, you're pretty," Melanee says. She asks Anne's name and offers to show her around. She pulls a drawer out from under one of the bunks and tells Anne she can put her things in there. Still laying on her bunk is Jenny.
Smoking a ciggy.
"You're a first-timer, aren't you, kid?" Anne says yes, and Melanee tells Anne that Jenny can show her the ropes.
The last of Anne's new roommates is Dorothy, played by Phyllis Coates, and she's standing by the window looking pensive. Melanee declares that they're all friends now and asks for confirmation from Jenny. Jenny says Anne's a first-timer, she can always tell, and Anne agrees anyways. Jenny offers to show Anne the ropes, and then spooky Dorothy kneels down by the bed and says that she knows Anne as Lois Johnson. Anne denies this. Dorothy asks, "You remember Andrew? And Timothy, my little boy?" Jenny tells Dorothy that Anne isn't Lois, so Dorothy wanders away.
Then Jenny explains that Dorothy thinks every new girl is Lois. "She's the one who ran off with her husband and kid," whispers Melanee. Then, in a southern accent, Melanee compliments Anne's skin and hair. "Don't let the funny southern talk fool you," says Jenny. "It comes direct from Duluth, Minnesota." "Now that isn't fair," drawls Melanee. "I worked in Georgia for 3 years. "Worked," says Jenny. She tells Anne to check Melanie's hands for calluses.
Rolling drunks isn't work. And then Anne, going through her things, opens up a portrait of her father and, my God, Raymond Hatton looks both surprised and recently deceased in this picture. Jenny grabs it and Anne snatches it back. Jenny says, "This kid's got a temper." And then Jenny asks what Anne's rap is. 1 to 5, says Anne. But Jenny wants to know what she's in for. Anne tries to take the matron's advice and prevaricates, but Jenny knows first-timers don't get put in the hole for shoplifting. Anne won't budge, but Jenny warns Anne not to fight it. Jenny knows everything, eventually. And Jenny affirms that she will find out the hard way if she has to.
Then Jenny tells Melanee to take Anne and stand by the door because Jenny wants some cover. Jenny rips a piece of paper from a notebook, goes back to her bunk, and starts scribbling. At the door, Melanee warns Anne to stay on Jenny's good side. She can get Anne anything she wants from the outside. Perfume, liquor, anything, as long as she's got the money for it. Jenny reaches into her underbunk drawer and, from a false bottom, pulls out a knife.
Jenny uses that knife to slice apart the box that had contained Anne's things.
Anne motions to Dorothy. "That one gives me the creeps," she says. "Dorothy? The doctors think she's almost cured." Jenny looks after her like she was her kid. Then Dorothy goes over to Jenny and says that it'll be Timothy's birthday soon. Jenny says they'll throw a party for him, just like they did last year.
Melanee tells Anne that Dorothy went after her husband and mistress and ended up killing both her man and the little boy, though the woman got away. Anne says, but she talks about them like they're still here. Melanee says that to Dorothy, they are still alive.
Then the lunch bell rings and the cell doors open. Dorothy goes over to Anne. "You can't fool me, Lois. I'd recognize you anywhere." Ooh. Dorothy goes out for some chow, and Melanee tries to get Anne to come with, but Anne doesn't have an appetite. "You've just got to eat something," says Melanee. "Keep away from me," snarls Anne. "Don't touch me." "I'm just trying to be friendly," says Melanee. "I don't want any friends," says Anne.
Anne's not there to make friends, as they always say in reality shows. As Melanee leaves, she says that this can be a terrible place if you don't have any friends. Jenny's still in the cell, but on her way out stops to offer Anne her own rules. And there's only one, and say it with me. No snitches. Keep your mouth shut. If you think you saw something, no you didn't. Remember that. It's your life insurance policy here. After Jenny leaves, Anne goes to sit at the little desk and starts sobbing.
A prison guard comes in and says Melanee said that Anne was sick and asks if they should fetch a doctor. Anne says no, it's not necessary. The guard tries to console her, saying not to worry, the first day is always the hardest. Yeah, I'm sure every day is better than the last.
It will be now. She leaves Anne to mope at her desk. And now we're back with the batty old woman we saw at the beginning of Anne's prison journey. She's in a storage room, poking her stubby fingers into a slit in the box that contained Anne's things, the one that Jenny opened up. And bingo, she finds a folded up piece of paper inside. She unfolds it and reads it with a surprised and gleeful look on her face. There's even a smidge of kooky in there.
Now we find ourselves in Reverend Fulton's office. He's at his desk and looking over Anne's file. All the newspaper clippings regarding her arrest and trial are included.
They're arranged in such a way that we can read all of them. Slain bandit found, girl accomplice arrested. Third member of trio still at large. Bank loot still unrecovered. So there's the whole story in 3 sentences.
The matron comes in and asks the Reverend if he's through with the file. He has her take a seat, and she asks if he's still convinced of Anne's innocence. There's room for doubt, he says. The matron picks up an article and reads that throughout the trial, Ann Carson maintained that she didn't know the two men she accompanied were planning on robbing the bank. Do you believe this tripe, she says?
And Reverend Fulton says it wasn't proved otherwise.
The matron reads on. Throughout cross-examination, she maintained that she left the dead man in the car and ran out without the briefcase of money.
And she never backed down from her story, which actually is a good thing when you're trying to maintain your innocence. Don't change your story. The matron calls this a yarn, and Reverend Fulton says that her story could be true. It was her word against the prosecution, and she didn't have a chance. The matron rolls her eyes and says that she can't match the Reverend's knowledge of God, but he's got nothing on her when it comes to figuring out girls in prison. She thinks he's a sucker and that he should stick to his Sunday sermons. Reverend Fulton says that the new church mission is to participate in life with tools like psychology and psychiatry, and to not be afraid to fight.
And this is what he intends to do in regard to Ann Carson. If he's right about her, he certainly won't hesitate to go to bat for her.
But the matron doesn't believe that he's going to be right about this.
Now it's party time at the prison.
No boys at this one, though.
The girls in prison are dancing to Tom's beat.
The only song that matters.
Except for Ann, Jenny, and Grandma Edwards, who are couch-sitting.
Grandma sits between Jenny and Ann, and Grandma reports that the item Jenny has been waiting for is in the prison office. Granny will see to it that she gets it in the morning. Jenny's happy, but Grandma's tit needs a tat. Where's her bourbon? Jenny says any day now, and she'll get it to her as soon as possible. Ann watches all these machinations with her brows raised high, but an otherwise blank expression on her face.
Then Grandma turns to Ann and says, "You're new here, aren't you? You're gonna like it here." And now, the batty woman from the storeroom is at her place at the piano. She is now the pianist at the party.
It's her true calling.
Some of the girls in prison have gathered around to listen to her play.
The dotty old woman is also warbling along, but this seems to be quite popular amongst her fellow inmates. Reverend Fulton comes to the party looking for Ann. He finds her on the couch, and seeing him, Grandma takes her leave. The Reverend plunks himself down right next to Ann and asks how she's doing. Shell-shocked Ann wants to know another word for nightmare. I think nightmare is just the word for nightmare. Can you imagine being here with these women? Reverend Fulton says he can very much imagine that. Ann's afraid that she's going to become like the other prisoners. She thinks that it's contagious.
Then we cut away to see the girls in prison dancing in a circle. I hope it's not contagious.
Reverend Fulton tells Ann that if she becomes like them, she's going to ruin his little project. Ann wants to know what he's talking about.
The Reverend says that he's not convinced the prosecution proved their case against her, and he thinks they can make an appeal. Ann doesn't want this, though. There are too many things working against her, bad environment, etc., and she'd rather the Reverend just leave it alone. But
Reverend Fulton ignores her wishes and says that he's going to keep digging. Ann vehemently objects to this, but then a guard blows the whistle and tells everyone that it's sack time.
Before leaving, Ann tells the Reverend that it's not that she's ungrateful, it's just that it's no use, and she just wants to drop the whole thing. The gangster guy from the club in the cold open is paying a visit to Pop Carson, Ann's father.
You recently saw a picture of him, so we know who it is.
Pop is sitting on his porch and asks if Paul is a cop. "I'm anything but that," laughs Paul. Paul seems to know a lot about Pop, even though he busted out of prison during a 5-year sentence after only serving 1 year. He still owes Michigan 4 more years. "If you're thinking about blackmailing me, you're wasting your time," says Pop. Paul looks around at his surroundings. "Yes, I can see that," he says. Paul goes on to say that he's been following Ann's story in the papers, and he believes he can be helpful in finding the stolen money if it's hidden on the property.
Pop Carson says that Ann never had the money, unfortunately, because he could really use it.
He starts coughing and pulls out some pills. "I need these to keep me alive," he stupidly confesses.
Paul offers to split the money. Wouldn't Pop like to live it up with that much scratch? And I looked it up, and the $38,000 that Ann allegedly is concealing will be worth $443,000 today. So yes, Pop would like half of that.
Paul says he's sure the money is there on the property somewhere. Pop doesn't believe that Ann would have left him in this condition. Paul continues, if he finds the money, he'd be willing to split it with Pop 50-50. But Pop still maintains that the money isn't there.
Pop says that you don't know Ann. She's been more of a mother to me than a daughter, and I thought, my God, man, grow up.
"She told me she didn't take that money, and that girl has never lied to me." "There's always a first time," says Paul, brandishing his gun. "You could just let me look."
Pop supposes he has no choice, but Paul sweetens the deal, reminding him of all the great stuff he'd be able to get with the $19,000. fix up the house, get a new car, new threads. So Pop is in. Where do we start? In the house, says Paul. Paul opens the door from the porch into the house, and Paul clumsily pushes the wheelchair that Pop was sitting in inside.
Now we're back at the prison, and Melanee is doing something to her hair.
She's trying to pin up her frizzy curls on the top of her head.
She notes that the doctor is keeping Dorothy longer each time he sees her. And Anne says that Melanee hasn't been helping any. Melanee says if it makes Dorothy feel good if Dorothy thinks Anne is Lois, why not help her?
I can think of a few reasons. Melanee predicts that exciting things are going to happen in the next 30 days. Her horoscope told her so. And then a guard comes to the cell saying that Reverend Fulton has summoned Anne to his office. Anne folds up a letter and hides it under her mattress. Mel makes some kind of hot for Reverend joke, and Anne just glares at her. After Anne leaves, Melanee, of course, reads the letter that Anne hid, but disappointingly, it's just a boring letter to Pop. Jenny snarks, "Were you expecting a map with X marks the spot?"
Melanee knows Anne's got that money hidden somewhere. Jenny says she has people working on it for her on the outside. Melanee says that if only they could break out and take her with us. Scum like us think alike, says Jenny.
Jenny is having some guns shipped in for just this occasion.
She says that Anne is becoming a real friend to her. The worse Melanee treats her, the more Anne opens up to Jenny. So Jenny tells her to keep it up.
Melanee is happy to oblige, she says, making her updo look even more wonky. She despises that girl. She turns to Jenny to show off her off-center do, causing Jenny to shudder loudly. Melanee whirls around to check her reflection in the mirror.
Now we see Reverend Fulton pacing around a bench on the prison grounds as Anne is escorted over.
It's a garden in the moonlight. How romantic.
It's beautiful, says Anne. For a moment I forgot where I was. Fulton says he thought she'd be more comfortable out here. Then he gets down to business.
Reverend Fulton gets right to the point. He talked to her trial judge today. "See," says Anne, "I told you there was no point." "Au contraire," says Reverend Fulton. "The judge thought that several things were against her in the trial. For one, the briefcase had disappeared."
"That's what it really boils down to, isn't it?" says Anne. "The money." She says they know about it in here, too.
"They think of her as a celebrity, an heiress." "Yeah, they find out fast," says Reverend Fulton.
He understands there were 3 people involved, Anne, George Stoney, and a third man who got away on foot.
He wants to know if Anne can help identify that man, but Anne has no further information, and she wishes that he would just forget the whole thing. Reverend Fulton says that he's out on a limb now and he can't get off. Anne says that was his choice. It wasn't what she wanted, and it still isn't. She demands to be left alone, a demand he's sure to ignore.
The Reverend reminds her that she wanted someone to believe in her, and he is that someone. "Just leave me alone," says Anne. "That's what I really want." Pop is sitting around at home in his wheelchair while Paul tears apart the house. He hasn't found anything. Paul wants Pop to visit Anne in the prison and get her to tell him where the money is, and to tell him if she doesn't tell him, he'll kill Pop. Pop reconsiders and decides to call the whole partnership off, but then decides he was only kidding when reminded of Paul's gun.
Back at the prison, an unseen man rolls up a message and places it into the stem of a hoe, pushing the handle in on top of it. And then we cut to Phyllis the tall blonde and Meg the short redhead, walking behind Anne as they work in the yard. They're all carrying large bags of dirt or something. Meg says that she's getting out in 2 weeks, and she and Phyllis say that they have cooked up the perfect plan. Meg needs dough after she gets out, and Anne could use some in here, right? Anne doesn't know what they're hinting at, so Phyllis tells Red to stop with the subtlety. In the equipment shed, hoes are being distributed to the prisoners, and we see the guy who had put the message in one of them. Jenny winks at the man who did that and gets the special hoe.
And then the prisoners and sacks of plant food are loaded onto the truck and sent out to garden. Later, the girls are poking at the dirt with their hose, or whatever verb goes with hose.
Using Melanee as cover again, Jenny kneels down to retrieve the message hidden in the hoe. She tells Melanee that the dough hasn't surfaced yet, and asks Melanee to rough up Anne so that she'll come running to Jenny.
Anne works her way towards them, and Melanee starts talking about Anne's case history, especially in regard to her father. "Leave my father out of it," snarls Anne.
Melanee gets in enough digs that a fight becomes inevitable.
Anne pushes Melanee, and they start to wrestle.
And then they roll into a conveniently positioned puddle so that the viewers can enjoy some female mud wrestling, until a guard comes along to break up the show.
Then we cut to Anne standing before the matron in the matron's office. Matron asks if Anne will take full responsibility for her share in the fight. Anne is silent, so is awarded with 5 days in solitary confinement.
Yay! That's got to be like a vacation.
In solitary, Anne is receiving a meal, and she asks the guard if her message to Reverend Fulton was received. but she's told that he's away and she'll be out of solitary before he comes back. After the 5 days, Anne is returned to her cell. Well, you're initiated now, kid, says Jenny. 5 days with nothing to do but sit around and think, says Anne. Dorothy says that Sunday is Timothy's birthday. Jenny tells her that Melanee will be back from solitary by then.
Now we see a car arriving at the prison. Paul is dropping off Pop. He tells Pop that he knows what to say to Anne and that he better lay it on thick. Pop asks for help getting out of the car, but Paul is wise to his scam. For our amusement, Pop exits the car in perfect health and then adopts an old man shuffle as he approaches the prison door.
In their cell, the girls are lamenting Sundays. Melanie's horoscope says to expect new and exciting experiences in the next few weeks. Dorothy remembers another day with weather like this. There were 3 earthquakes, all in a row. And today is Timothy's birthday. She asks Jenny if they'll bring him to see her. Maybe he can't get away, honey. We'll have the party anyway. Dorothy then reminds Jenny they'll need 6 candles for his cake. Timothy's 6. Then the guard comes over to get Anne. She has a visitor.
As Anne leaves, Dorothy's convinced that Anne's father has brought Timothy to see Anne. Melanee encourages her to get angry at Anne, and Jenny tells Melanee to cut it out. Melanee and Jenny bicker, and then Jenny goes to read Anne's letters stashed under her pillow, but there's still nothing good in them.
So Anne is escorted in to speak with her father. She's excited to see he's down with the wheelchair. He must be feeling better. He says he's not. He's a sick man. And if he won't kill him, his heart will. He explains that there's a man who is insistent that the money is in the house and he can't get rid of him. She tells him to call the police, but he says he can't. This man has something on him, and that's besides the gun. This man knows that Anne has that money.
Anne asks for a description of this man, which Pop gives, along with his name, so no description needed. Anne recommends letting him just search the place. That'll convince him that she doesn't have the money. Pop says that he did look, but he's not leaving without the money, so they've got to find it. And then to amp up his sob story, Paul says that he got kicked off the county relief rolls, and now, unless Anne helps out, he's going to starve to death. Anne's eyes are full of tears, and she offers to send him her prison earnings, and she says the county will put him back on, and then once she's out, they can run away together.
Pop tells her that Paul has agreed to split the money with him 50-50. All she has to do is tell him where she's hidden it. Anne insists she hasn't got the money, and with that, her visiting time is up. Before leaving, she tells him she'll write to him, and he should write to her too. Everything. Everything, he asks? She says she has a way to get mail past the guards. Leaving, Pop moans that this will probably be the last time he ever sees her.
Don't say that, she cries. But Pop says, you don't know this Paul. But doesn't she know him? I think she knows him. But now it's party time. Well, if you can call it a party. Dorothy bans Anne from her sad kid's birthday party. Just as well, Anne was leaning in uncomfortably close to crazy Dorothy. Melanee assigns Anne lookout duty at the door, and then Dorothy blows out the candles and Jenny carves up the cake with that knife that she's got stashed. Everyone but Anne gets a wedge of the cake, but it doesn't matter as the lights go out and the bell rings. It's bedtime.
Lights out already? This party was just getting started. Jenny puts Dorothy in bed, and Dorothy starts to cry. Timothy's dead, isn't he? Yes, says Melanee. Now go to sleep. Dorothy looks down at Melanee from the top bunk. Lois killed Timothy, didn't she? She thinks I don't know. Leave me alone, says Melanee. Dorothy gets up from her bunk and pulls out that knife from Jenny's drawer that Jenny had just used to cut the cake. Then she goes after Anne in her bunk. Anne screams, Jenny, help! And Jenny tries to wrestle the knife away from Dorothy. The noise alerts the guard, who disarms Dorothy, pockets the knife, and escorts Dorothy from the cell.
Melanie's happy to see the back of Dorothy, but Jenny snarls that Melanee helped bring this on and calls her a cesspool. Jenny tells Anne that she's lucky she was awake. Anne says that it's odd. She was only awake because she was worried about her dad. Jenny gets the whole sad story of Anne being parentified at a young age to take care of a grown man who should be taking care of her. Anne says that all the money in the world isn't worth this, and Jenny hears that, sister. Anne asks Jenny to use her special skills to smuggle letters to and from her dad, and Jenny's on board with this idea, of course.
Then Anne tells Jenny she's the only friend she has in there. Jenny tells her not to be stupid. You don't make real friends in a place like this. The next day, the girls are milling around outside on the grounds. Meg and Phyllis are around, and Jenny and Grandma Edwards are putting on a show for them. Grandma tells Jenny that she received 2 new boxes of soap with some interesting contents. She was only able to open one of them because the new girl in the laundry room seemed awfully interested in it.
And she points to the new girl who's leaning against the wall reading a book.
Jenny instructs Grandma to put that item in a sack of plant food and let that girl see her do it. That way, if she's a stoolie, she'll mark it. And that Grandma should just hold on to the other one for now, until they're sure what they're dealing with. Oh, and Aunt Carson should be receiving some mail. Jenny wants it delivered directly to her. Then she leaves, noticing that Meg and Phyllis have been lurking nearby during that conversation.
Back inside, a guard is bringing Anne to see Reverend Fulton. He's just back from vacation, and what did she want while she was in there? She tells him about her father's predicament and asks for his help. Reverend Fulton promises to look into Pop's money problems and that she shouldn't worry about her old man. And now he's got good news. He has a friend who looked at her case and is just now writing a brief on her behalf. Anne cuts him off and tells him to stop. She just wants to serve out her time. Reverend Fulton says she sounds as cynical as Jenny. Anne says that she said it was contagious. But anyway, forget about it. Reverend Fulton says that this is bigger than her now. Now it's his fight because he feels that he can best serve God by taking on her struggles, even if she doesn't want him to. Kind of arrogant, I think.
Anne insists she doesn't want her case appealed and says she won't cooperate, but she would still like the Reverend to check in on her father's financial situation. Anne leaves, and the Reverend follows her out into the hall. There he meets Matron Jamieson, who asks how the Carson crusade is going. I've just been fired, says Fulton. It's just as well, says the matron. She has it on authority that Aunt Carson did take the money, and a break in the case is about to be made.
She also thinks there's going to be a prison break attempt soon, and the plan is for the jailbreakers to take Anne along with them. She says that they can't warn Anne for some reason, but they'll keep an eye on her. And she's going to recommend that Anne be moved to an honor farm, more in keeping with the kind of correction that a prisoner like Anne needs. It might take 3 weeks, though.
Back outside, Meg and Phyllis are approaching Grandma Edwards. Meg tells Grandma that she's getting out tomorrow, and she's got $5 that would do Grandma better than it would do her. All she would have to do is tell Anne that a message arrived, and it's under some bags in the storeroom. Grandma says it sounds more like a $10 job, so Phyllis reaches into her shirt to contribute. Then Grandma goes to Anne to tell her about the message, and Anne rushes off to read her mail without expressing any monetary gratitude towards Grandma Edwards.
Granny looks miffed. Anne goes into the storeroom and is immediately jumped by Phyllis and Meg. They threaten her with a club or a pipe or something, but Anne says that she doesn't have the money. Jeez. They give her a minute to fess up and tell them where it is.
Meanwhile, Grandma Edwards has gone straight to Jenny to tell her about the ambush. So Jenny goes in to save the day. She chases off Meg and Phyllis and holds Anne, trying to comfort her. A guard comes over. Who slugged you? She asks. Jenny says she stepped on a rake and it came up and hit her in the head. I wasn't talking to you, says the guard. I stepped on a rake, confirms Anne.
And now we're at Pop's house. He announces he has a letter from Anne. Paul snatches it out of Pop's hands, but Pop spoils the contents, announcing that it doesn't have any mention of hidden cash. And Pop is tired of Paul's company and says that he's been through the house and yard without finding anything, so it's time for him to accept there's no money there and get the hell out. However, Paul has a story to tell about Anne. She did take the money.
Paul says Anne told the court she didn't know she was on a job. She lied. She spent 3 days casing the joint. She said she didn't really know the man who was killed. She knew him well enough.
They were out 12 times.
And she thought that leaving the third guy's name out of it would leave him so grateful that he'd give up $38,000. Pop asks how he knows so much. Paul says there were 3 people on that bank job. One guy and the girl drove off, leaving the patsy to shoot it out at the bank. Paul was that third bank robber.
Wow, what a shocking development.
Well, that changes things, says Pop, provided you're telling the truth.
Paul says it's all true. So tell Anne about me and see what Anne has to say. Paul says that he's through playing around. He wants his cut, and Pop is going to give it to him.
The girls in prison are working the field again. But it's lunchtime, and Jenny has a letter for Anne. After reading it, she has Meg go get Anne. Anne comes and eagerly reads the letter, and Jenny goes to Melanee, who asks who it's from. Her father, says Jenny. He keeps asking about the money, and someone is looking for it.
Jenny goes to Melanee to report on the contents of that letter. They have some competition in their quest for cash. Melanee doesn't like the idea of some thief getting their money. Jenny considers that maybe Anne's story is legit. She didn't break even after the beating. Melanee warns Jenny not to try going after that money without her, and Jenny says, oh, she would never. They mull over the difficulties in taking Anne with them when they break out. Everyone has to go back to work now, and the two agree that the break is going to happen tomorrow. Jenny goes to Anne and asks her about things at home, and Anne lies. Everything's fine.
Back at Pop's house, Paul has grown tired of searching the house, so now he's searching the grounds. He looks under a bush, and with a little digging, he finds a satchel. Only it's empty. Paul brings it in to show Pop. Now what do you say, Pop? Not 200 yards from the house. Now I'm really going to tear the place apart. Pop is incensed.
He's so incensed that he gets up out of his wheelchair and helps Paul tear the place apart.
How could she do it? How could she leave me like this?
In extraordinarily bad timing, Reverend Fulton arrives for a visit.
He knocks, and Pop scrambles back to his wheelchair as Paul hides in the back room. Come in, says Pop.
Reverend Fulton comes in the door and introduces himself. Pop Carson invites him to sit down at the table and immediately starts in on his tale of woe. But Reverend Fulton wants to talk about his trip to the county welfare agency. He now knows that Pop has lied to Anne. He's still getting checks even though his only disability is pure laziness. Pop whines for a bit, but Reverend Fulton lectures him, telling him to stop abusing Anne's good nature and stop worrying her. He's kept her tied to his wheelchair long enough.
The Reverend stands to leave, but notices the satchel on the table. Then he notices Paul's jacket hanging on a chair. Whose coat is this, he asks. Pop says he never really noticed it before. Then Reverend leaves, saying he's going to help Anne see the kind of person that her father really is.
But Pop Carson can only be relieved to see him go. Now we're back in that romantic garden setting. Reverend Fulton waits for Anne. The guard brings her, and Reverend Fulton delivers the news about her skiving layabout father who lied to her about not getting help from the county anymore. And then he says he saw the briefcase, and he knows that someone was looking for the money. He tells Anne, "You do have the money, don't you?"
Anne breaks down. She just wanted to know what it was like to have money.
She just wanted to be able to buy whatever she needed. A new dress, furniture, medication for her dad. But what she really wanted was to tear up her dad's relief checks into 100 pieces. Throw them in the face of the county.
Fulton says that must have been what he sensed in her all along, her conscience. He tells her she's going to give that money back. Giving it back will give her peace of mind. Otherwise, she'll end up just like Jenny. Anne says no, she's paying for that money with 5 years of her life. And remember, you said you wouldn't tell anyone about anything we discussed. The Reverend reminds her that her father is in danger because of that money. And that's why Anne is going to confess and return the money.
And even worse, her soul is in jeopardy too. Anne says she's heard enough, and Reverend Fulton says he hopes so.
The next day, the girls are outside again. Grandma Edwards is reporting to Jenny the status of the gun she's smuggling in. As she had been instructed, one had been put in a bag of plant food, and that new girl marked it, just as predicted. So Grandma Edwards thought best to remove it. The other one is still safe in the soapbox. Jenny tells Grandma Edwards to smuggle the gun she pulled from the plant food up to Jenny's cell as soon as she can. Anne tells Grandma that she has earned herself an extra drink today.
And now we're back on the work detail, where the gals all unload bags off the truck. Jenny and Melanee grab one bag in particular and take it to the side of the truck as if to open it.
If Grandma's right, the guards should check us any second. The guards indeed do come over. Grandma was right, says Melanee. What's so special about this sack, Jenny? The guard asks. They look through it as Jenny and Melanee run to the side of the truck, but they find nothing unusual. Good old Grandma, says Jenny.
Now we're in Reverend Fulton's office, where he's looking out the window spying on the gals.
The matron comes behind him. Nice view, eh, Reverend? I never could get quite used to it myself.
We're back with Jenny now. She hauls Anne somewhere. And back in the Reverend's office, the matron tells Reverend Fulton that Anne's transfer is now being considered. There's a lot of quick cuts here.
During this time, Grandma Edwards fetches that new girl from the laundry room and says that she wants to introduce her to the others.
Back in the Reverend's office, still watching, the Reverend and the matron witness the start of the gang-up.
The Reverend and the matron scurry out the door to see if there's anything they can do, but it's too late for New Girl. She's been murdered.
Everyone's running away from the new dead girl's body. Everyone except Anne, who screams. Jenny comes back and hauls her away as the guards arrive. And now there's a lineup. The matron walks up and down the line of all the prisoners, telling them that, as usual, no one has said anything. So for now, they're all considered a suspect. And they're going to be confined to their cells until further notice with all privileges suspended.
Back in their cell, Jenny, Melanee, and Anne are discussing the close call. Jenny finds the gun that Grandma Edwards left for her. Good old Grandma, she says. Melanee is reading Jenny's horoscope. She should avoid travel at this time. Then Jenny tells Anne she's proven she's one of them, the way she handled the matron. Melanee isn't sure. She thinks she's in a different class, but with $38,000 stashed away.
Anne says she doesn't have the money, okay? Melanee says that she's going to prove that Anne does have it. And then an extraordinary thing happens. An earthquake. Wow. The whole building shakes. Beams and rubble fall from the ceiling. The women panic in their cells and bang on the doors with their metal cups. We see a corner of one building collapse. In the matron's office, Reverend Fulton reports that there's a large amount of damage in the east wing.
The matron makes an announcement over the PA that the doors will be opened and everyone should head to safety at the front entrance where prison personnel will be in attendance. Then she and the Reverend make a run for it.
The cell doors open and everyone picks their way over the rubble to get out. But an inopportunely shifted bed frame jams the door to Anne and Jenny and Melanie's cell. Jenny and Anne try to unjam the door as Melanee gets the gun. When the door opens, Melanee points the gun at Anne and Jenny and says they're all going out together, but through the back gate, not the front. Anne wants to get out, but Melanee says, "Not with $38,000, you're not."
Jenny says that money is no good to a corpse. Then a second trouble sends the girls scrambling into their bunks for cover. Reverend Fulton makes his way to the cell block to make sure everyone's clear. Melanee, still holding the gun, warns the others to keep quiet. Reverend Fulton completes his check, missing the girls hunkered down in their bunk. Once the coast is clear, Melanee tells Jenny to grab the meal ticket and let's get out of here.
Jenny warns Anne not to cross Melanee, and they successfully escape out the back way. Back at Pop Carson's house, they're listening to the news and hear that all but 3 girls have been collected. Girls, they're in their mid-40s. Among the missing 3 are Anne Carson, notorious for the fatal bank robbery in Modesto. Paul clucks that they'll be there by the morning. Pop thinks that the morning will come faster if he's allowed to go to sleep now.
Then we catch up with Jenny, Melanee, and Anne. They've been walking a while and come across an abandoned shed. Melanee is sent off to find some food, and Jenny and Anne go inside and throw themselves down on a pile of hay. Jenny warns Anne to keep an eye on Melanee. She's sure Anne has that money, and Melanee aims to get part of it. She goes on to say that she told her herself that Anne wasn't smart enough to pull a job like that. She glances over at Anne to see her reaction, but there isn't one.
She didn't take the bait.
Jenny notes that Anne doesn't live far from there. Near Bakersfield, says Anne, about 3 hours by car.
That's quite a walk. Back in the prison, a guard reports to Reverend and Matron that the 3 missing women aren't in the building, nor on the grounds. The Reverend tells Matron that he knows they took Anne, but Matron says that they're too busy tending to the wounded here to go find her. And anyway, the phone lines are down. They'll be back by morning, and they should be able to call the Bakersfield PD then. Then a guard comes in to announce that the ambulance for Fresno are there. The matron leaves, and the Reverend goes out on his own.
In the shed, Anne wakes up to find Melanee staring at her. "Where's Jenny?" she asks. Outside, flagging down a car, Melanee tells Anne to get moving. She wants to be at her house by daybreak. Anne once again insists that there is no money, but Melanee is tired of hearing this. The only reason Anne is still alive is because of that money.
Melanee is apparently at her limit. She jumps on top of Anne and starts strangling her. I think this is just another salacious scene for, well, we know who it's for. Jenny runs in to pull Melanee off of Anne. Jenny says there's a town 4 or 5 miles away. If they go there, they'll have no problem getting a car. Melanee thinks this is perfect. She's going to nap for an hour, and then they can go. She gives Jenny the gun and then rolls over into the straw and falls fast asleep.
Jenny heads out to keep watch, but Anne begs her not to leave her alone with Melanee. She's crazy. Jenny says she saw a truck about 10 minutes down the road. She'll go and get it, and Anne should come out running when she sees the lights.
Anne would like Jenny to leave her the gun, but Jenny says no, she might need it. And Anne tells her to hurry up. In the matron's office, which miraculously survived the earthquake, a guard enters. The matron says that the phone should be back in an hour, and when they are back, send the Bakersfield police to the Carson place.
The truck pulls up at Anne's house, and Jenny drops Anne off. Paul sees them arrive and goes off to hide in a back room.
Jenny drops off Anne and wishes her well, and Anne thanks her. But Jenny doesn't take off. She just pulls ahead a little and stops the truck.
At this time, the Reverend arrives as well, and he sees Jenny's truck pull over down the road, but doesn't think much of it. Anne goes inside. Pop tells her he heard on the radio that she got away, and he was expecting her. "Me too, Anne," says Paul, coming out from hiding with his gun drawn. Pop says he's made a deal with them. They get half the money. Anne says she knows how these guys deal.
That's not a promise he's going to keep.
Anne says she's handing the money over to the police. Besides, the police will be there soon looking for her, and Paul wouldn't want to be here when that happens. Paul says she's smarter and tougher than he thought.
Paul thinks that she's going to keep the money for herself, but when he leaves, he's leaving with the money. Paul spots Reverend Fulton running towards the door. He orders Anne to get rid of him or else, and then he goes to hide again. Reverend Fulton comes in and greets the Carsons. Anne wants to know what he wants. He said he was going to give her a ride back to the prison. Anne says she's not going back. Reverend Fulton is surprised that his constant annoyance hasn't changed Anne's mind. She tells him to go, looking terrified.
Meanwhile, Jenny is taking her position outside the house with her gun at the ready.
Reverend Fulton says he's going to the cops, but she just tells him to get out, eyes wide.
The Reverend Fulton goes to leave and says he will be contacting the police as soon as he is able. "Thanks for warning me," says Anne. "You'd better go." The Reverend opens the door to leave, and Jenny comes in. "Hi, Dad. I'm Jenny, Anne's friend."
Her gun's drawn too. She orders Reverend Fulton to get back and then orders Anne to get the money. But instead of threatening Anne, she threatens to kill Pop, and Anne seems to cave. Anne says that the money's outside. Jenny orders everyone to get out and has Pop grab the bag. Out on the porch, Anne says that it's not her money to give away. Jenny laughs at the notion of giving it to the police and promises to sign an affidavit swearing that she forced Anne to give her the money. Anne looks to the Reverend for guidance, but it has none.
Meanwhile, Paul is sneaking out the back door to keep tabs on everyone and what he sees as potentially his money. Anne goes to a post on the porch, and the money is hidden inside. 100 times I've been aiming to fix that post, says Pop. Then he adds, I wouldn't take those bottom bills. They've got termites.
Now we see Paul heading toward the front of the house. Jenny orders Anne to put the money in the bag. And then we see Paul on his way to the front of the house. Now that the bag's all filled up, Jenny tells Anne to walk her to the truck.
She really was going to give that money back to the police, says Pop. That's not the way she talked inside, says Reverend Fulton. You had a gun on you the entire time you were in there, Reverend, says Pop. As Jenny and Anne are walking away, Paul jumps out from behind the house and shoots at Jenny.
Jenny whirls around and fires, but then Paul shoots her again and she goes down. He runs for the money, and the Reverend decides to confront Paul. And though Paul could shoot, he opts to throw punches instead, not knowing that the Reverend did some boxing in the Navy. The Reverend takes off his tweed jacket so he can do some serious fighting and starts wailing on Paul. Pop says they don't make preachers like they used to. Anne runs over to Jenny and watches as the Reverend beats the snot out of Paul.
Paul is knocked unconscious just as the police show up. Without saying a word, the police pick up Paul and drag him to the squad car. Then the Reverend joins Anne at Paul and Jenny. Anne tells Jenny she's not hurt bad and they're calling an ambulance. I got it coming, kid, grunts Jenny. Then she looks at the Reverend, confesses to killing the stoolie, and dies.
Later, Anne says a tender goodbye to Pop, whose only concern is who's going to look after him. Finally wise to his shenanigans, Anne tells Pop to look after himself for once. As she and the Reverend leave, Pop asks if the Reverend will be back, and the Reverend says in a few days he'll come back. So I guess the Reverend's going to be looking after him too.
After Anne is placed in the back of the police car, the Reverend shuts the door for them. Then he goes off to his own car as the camera pans up to the steeple of a church.
And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Girls in Prison from 1956.
Girls in Prison was the first of many films that Edward L. Cahn did for AIP with producer Alex Gordon.
The LA Evening Citizen News announced in February of 1956 that Richard Denning had been cast for Girls in Prison. Shortly after that, they published notice that Girls in Prison would start filming on March 5th, 1956. On March 9th, an article in the paper said that Diana Darrin and Joan Taylor had been cast. Of Taylor, they wrote that this would be, quote, a part which is a departure from her native Indian girls.
Yeah, she's an Apache woman.
You haven't seen that yet.
In Hedda Hopper's column for April 6, 1956, she said that Girls in Prison producer Alex Gordon had wired her in response to a previous column about the lack of older Hollywood actors in current films. Gordon wrote, producers didn't tire of them, it was exhibitors who screamed every time we used them. But in our latest picture, Girls in Prison, we had Raymond Hatton, Mae Marsh, Jane Darwell, and Eddie Cobb. Exhibitors complain the public will think it is an old picture or a reissue. So that's why so many old-timers aren't working today, but we keep right on using them.
In Edward Shallot's April 11, 1956 LA Times column, he wrote that Richard Denning would be soon starring in Hell Raiders for AIP, and just as he did with Girls in Prison, he would have profit participation.
The Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle noted in an April 1956 blurb that Diana Darrin, whose screen name doesn't reveal it, is a Jewish girl, and that she just signed for a role in Girls in Prison, though it was probably in post-production at that point.
Though the film depicts an earthquake, the set was nearly rocked by another natural disaster. On location in Chatsworth, California, as Cahn filmed the scene of Anne and Melanee wrestling in the mud, a minor tornado hit. According to Mark Thomas McGee in the book Faster and Furiouser, as this was the only day the crew was scheduled to film in this location, Cahn kept the cameras rolling, saying, "It'll add to the realism."
A production code administrator warned Gordon that any hint of lesbianism, whether in speech or manners, had to be eliminated from the script, but Gordon filmed them despite the warning.
Girls in Prison was released on a double bill with Hot Rod Girl beginning in July of 1956.
Box Office Magazine recommended theater owners use a mock prison set in the lobby with one or two girls, appropriately attired, behind the mock prison bars.
Taglines for Girls in Prison include, "What happens to girls without men?"
"What happens to women without men?"
"Revelation of truth about girls behind prison bars."
"The shocking story of one man against 1,000 women."
That sounds exciting. Box Office Magazine said Girls in Prison was a far better picture than Hot Rod Girl. There's more marquee voltage in the cast of this one than is to be found in its running mate. Certainly the screenplay, which is far from free of cliches, is not going to win awards for its finesse, originality, or believability. It boasts virtually nothing that has not previously been used in countless earlier offerings dealing with women in prison.
Variety said, Girls in Prison is as routine as its title, an overlength jail yarn with telegraphic situations which reduce movement to a walk. Characters occasionally get over well enough for casual interests, however, and the film is okay for lowercase bookings and program runs. Miss Taylor shows to advantage and turns in a performance better than her material.
The Los Angeles Examiner said, there's a pretty good story in Girls in Prison, which apparently stemmed from the big earthquake that rocked the Tehachapi Women's Prison a few years back.
The review in Vermont's Rutland Daily Herald said of Girls in Prison, action is scarce, words are many, and the chaplain's occasional philosophizing is uncalled for. Addicts of the prison flick will enjoy it notwithstanding.
In the Boston Globe, a brief review of both Girls in Prison and Hot Rod Girl had the reviewer concluding, neither film is a particularly noble picture of American youth, but for that matter, neither is a notable example of cinematic attainment. Girls in Prison seems to have been made primarily for addicts of the thrill school.
Industry Insider newsletter Harrison's Reports reviewed Girls in Prison and called it an ordinary prison melodrama of program grade, best suited as a supporting feature. The introduction of an earthquake so as to give Joan Taylor a chance to escape with her cellmates is arbitrary, but it may get by with those who are not too fussy about story values. The photography is sharp and clear.
In August of 1956, Charles F. Stewart wrote to the editor of the Louisville Courier-Journal, complaining that, quote, I was planning to take my children to the movies last night, but after reviewing the entertainment section found that there was a minimum to see. After mentioning titles that included Hot Rod Girl and Girls in Prison, Stewart concluded, Hollywood does not seem to be cooperating to any great extent in the public's struggle against the juvenile problem.
Variety announced in 2015 that Cinedigm was teaming with producers Lou Rusoff, Jeff Katz, and Hal Sadoff to reinvent 10 AIP titles, placing them all in the same cinematic universe. Girls in Prison was one of the titles to be remade, along with Viking Women and the Sea Serpent, The Brain Eaters, She Creature, Teenage Caveman, Reformed Schoolgirl, The Undead, War of the Colossal Beast, The Cool and the Crazy, and The Day the World Ended. The plan was to shoot all 10 films back-to-back and have them share a single movie universe with a big recurring cast of anti-heroes, monsters, and bad girls, said Lou Rusoff. The films would be distributed by Cinedigm in theaters on DVD, along with digital and television releases, including a slot on a planned digital network that was to target the Comic-Con audience.
Girls in Prison actually was remade as part of Showtime's Rebel Highway series in 1994. Directed by John McNaughton and written by Samuel Fuller and Krista Lang, Ione Skye and Anne Hage starred in a story that more closely resembled Reformed Schoolgirl than Girls in Prison.
Just like with Reformed Schoolgirl, the theatrical movie poster for Girls in Prison featuring a catfight between Helen Gilbert and Joan Taylor has become a collector's item. The poster shows the blonde-haired Gilbert strangling the dark-haired Taylor.
So now, as we always do, let's talk about how we felt about the movie. I'll let you go first.
I always enjoyed these old black and white films.
I know. Is there a but there?
No, I always look forward to doing these ones.
But I mean, did you enjoy this one the way you expected to?
Well, for much of the movie, I thought it just seemed to be the same old, because we've already done a few women in prison films. 99 Women, I think, was the first one. We did Reformed Schoolgirl not that long ago. And it seemed to be following the same beats. But then that earthquake hit.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
So it was nice to see something totally different than what we've seen before.
I was not expecting that.
Neither was I.
It does seem like a bit of a contrivance, but I don't mind because it got us out of there and we really needed to get out of that cell. It was such a static movie before that.
Right. Another one that we did was Why Must I Die?
Mm-hmm.
And very little of that took place in the prison. And we were with Terry Moore's character there. She wasn't really in the cell with the others. She had a private cell because she was on death row.
Only her lawyer visited her.
So we missed a lot of the camaraderie that you have between prisoners.
Well, Deborah Patchett's character didn't miss any of it. They kind of beat her upside the head with it. All that camaraderie.
So when we were watching this, in my head, I kept getting it confused with Reformed Schoolgirl because at the beginning, it's almost the same movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a creepy guy who wants to help for whatever reason in both films. It's a teacher in Reformed Schoolgirl, and here it's a reverend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's impossible to say what their reasons are. Being cynical, I kind of ascribe it to attraction. There's something going on there. The teacher in reform school girl zeroed in on whatever her name was and wouldn't stop. He didn't care about any of the other prisoners. And it seems like Reverend Fulton doesn't care about any of the other prisoners either.
The only one he mentions by name is Jenny. He doesn't have anything positive to say about her whatsoever.
Well, I mean, can you blame him? But no, he's focused on Anne to kind of a self-aggrandizing point. It seems like he's making this more about himself and proving that he can save a person is more important than what this person actually wants him to do. Anne just wants to serve out her time and go get her money. Everyone else messed that up for her.
At least in Reform School Girl, it was a teacher who was bugging her. Here it's a preacher, and that makes the film a little preachy.
Well, yeah, he's such a dry character, too. We don't know anything about him. At least the teacher in Reform School Girl had a bit of a backstory.
He had a girlfriend, he claimed.
Well, priests don't get to have girlfriends.
No, but he was in the Navy and he was a boxer. That's all we know. And that does come into play.
That's right. I did say to put a pin in that when we first came across it.
I do think that they had a nice variety of characters in this prison. And I don't think that any of them were really cliches, except for maybe the crazy one, Dorothy.
Was she a cliche? I thought maybe she was the least cliched. Because we had the tough broad, and then we had like the homicidal broad.
But I think that they were both presented more dimensionally than just being that cliche person, but just being stuck in that character type. Phyllis Coates as Dorothy, who is dealing with mental illness based upon what she did, is similar to the girl in Reform School Girl who believes she was pregnant.
But just scarier. She's a lot more frightening than that girl. And she did a really good job, too, because she gave me the willies after the birthday party, and they've all been sent to bed. And she's sitting up there kind of fretting about her kid. And the way her head swivels towards Anne and looks at her, it's like the Exorcist movie where her head just spun around. That scene gave me goosebumps because it was so creepy.
I think it's creepier because she's just lurking in the background most of the time. Every once in a while she comes out and says, "It's Timothy's birthday."
Right. Or "You're Lois. You killed my baby."
Yeah, everything she says is creepy. And then she goes back into the shadows.
Yeah, she was very effectively done. I kind of missed her when she was gone. I liked Jenny. I liked her character. Even though she ultimately was bad, she did such a great job of pretending not to be. And I kind of like that character type, the tough broad who's seen it all. She's always smoking.
Yeah, I thought she was interesting too. That's Adele Jergens, who did a few films in the early days of AIP. I think this is the last one that she did. So we got some earlier films. She's in, I think, The Day the World Ended and something else.
Oh, well,
so we'll see her again.
Yay. Did care for Melanee, though. She just seemed psycho for no good reason. She didn't really have enough backing that up. But I guess she was in prison, so she wanted out.
Yeah, she had nothing else to do but her hair.
Well, she could spend a little more time on that.
And we had Raymond Hatton returning again. He's in so many of these old black and white films.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, he's coming up in the next one, too. He kind of always plays the same character, too. Just kind of the dotty old guy.
Yeah, he was Windy Wagon Wheels and Flesh in the Spur, and he was the kind uncle in Shake, Rattle, and Rock, who was married to, what's her name?
Oh, Margaret Dumont.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's always a comic relief type character. And here it doesn't play as well.
No, because he's kind of pathetic in this.
He wears out his welcome very fast, too. I kind of snarked on it a couple of times, the way he expected his kid to take care of him like a baby. She's the baby. He's supposed to take care of her. And yet he's wandering around his house because there's no child to take after him. You're right. It's pathetic.
I think this is a pretty good movie in spite of the character of Anne Carson, who is probably one of the least likable characters in the entire movie.
That is true. Maybe it's just because she had a plan and everyone else was putting the spokes in her wheels. She just wanted to keep her head down and get out when she got out and find that money tucked away in the bramble behind the porch.
And I just think it's an interesting choice to make the main character so dull. I mean, you don't support her. You don't care that she wants to keep the money.
No, the only thing that I can say is I can contrast with the other characters, like with the Reverend, when she was telling him to freaking leave her alone and he wouldn't. I kind of was on her side then. But then when she was in the cell with the other women, then she was the easiest to overlook of all the characters in there. She was kind of whiny. She didn't have much to do other than deny she had the money every single time. And that's odd because this movie is full of weird characters. Got the old lady who played the piano, got Grandma, Phyllis and Meg. Everyone's putting on a hell of a performance. And Anne is just kind of there. The Reverend, too. He's very boring as well.
What do you think Anne was supposed to accomplish by going to the club in the beginning? Was she just looking for a place to hide?
I have no idea. That was never explained.
I mean, Paul was definitely not happy to see her there.
No, and she's better off without him. Maybe she wanted to share the money with him, but...
I don't think she wanted to share the money with him, so it didn't make any sense for her to go there unless she's just...
But that would be the only reason to go there, is if she wanted to give him his cut.
Or to hide. But then she'd have to expect to give it to him.
Right. So if she wants the money, she has no business being there.
And before she showed up, the police are already there staking out the joint. Because the waiter goes out and sees them, and then Paul goes out and confirms this. Why are they there if they don't even know that Paul's involved?
Right. Maybe it's a coincidence? The movie just doesn't explain it. I think they just wanted an excuse to play Diane Richards singing Tom's Beat. And so they had to put him in a club, and then they decided to use that as a way to get Anne caught. It just doesn't really make sense. I have a question for you as a man, and I'm a woman. Is there an appeal to the girls in prison type movies, Caged Heat, etc., apart from the prurient, seeing a bunch of women wrestling and tearing each other's clothes off from time to time? Is there anything else to that genre besides that for you, in your opinion?
I don't know. I always look forward to those scenes when we're doing the podcast because it's easy to write about. They fight and I wait for them to finish so I can go on to the next part.
It just seems to me that there's a particular kink involved here that maybe neither one of us shares.
Well, I'm not a fan of wrestling, and I know that a lot of people are, and I think it probably goes along the same lines. I mean, if I was going to watch wrestling, I'd probably rather watch women wrestle than two big guys in short pants.
You know, that's fair. I think I would agree with that. But then I'm not really into wrestling either. But here, there just seems to be a salaciousness to it that can't really be expressed because it's the 1950s, but that is just understood by its audience.
I wish we were able to ask Lou Rusoff what he thought.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I'm watching a Lou Rusoff movie where I wonder what makes that guy tick. And this is definitely one of them. Them rolling into the puddle. Come on, nobody is that dumb. It's not going to think that, oh yeah, that's for me. You know, that was made for a certain segment of the audience. Now they're wrestling around in mud.
Well, it's exploitation. It's an exploitation film. You can tell by the title.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tame by today's standards.
Yes.
Even the wrestling, the fighting is tame by today's standards.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to judge it by the way it would have been perceived in the 50s, not the way we're looking at it now, 70 years hence.
If I have one complaint about this movie, it's probably the length.
Really drags at points. Because what's happening at Pops, it happens over and over and over again. Like, how many times can Paul complain that he can't find the money? Well, apparently about 17. And then in the prison, everyone's just trying to finagle their way into Anne's good graces so they can find out about the money. And if that doesn't work, they're going to beat the crap out of her and find out.
Well, in the prison, there's a lot of business going on, but it all turns out to be important. There's a lot of talk about how Jenny's going to need to get a gun in there, but we don't know why. And the reason is so Melanee can take it so they can get out of prison. But
well, they're a team, so it's okay that she took it. She didn't really go against the plan. Well, they were supposed to get 2 guns, remember?
Right.
They only got the 1.
Right. And it was fortuitous that the earthquake happened because I don't know how they planned to break out otherwise. They're just like, okay, we'll move our plan up. This works.
Maybe they were planning the earthquake. I mean, Dorothy kind of foreshadowed that. The last time there was this kind of weather, there were 3 earthquakes. So maybe they were counting on it. First the tornado, then the earthquakes, and then we run.
I think it's safe to say that despite all those strands, that there ended up being no loose ends in this movie.
No, I don't think so.
We don't know what happened to Dorothy, but that doesn't matter. I mean, she was carted off to somewhere to be watched, and I'm sure that she survived the earthquake and is still being watched.
And even if she didn't, it's probably a kindness that she didn't. Since they don't seem to be able to cure her. Or she probably needs to be on medication of some kind, and it hasn't been invented yet.
We saw Richard Denning, who was Reverend Fulton here, an Oklahoma woman.
He was the stand-up guy in that movie, too.
Yeah, but he was not as annoying in Oklahoma Woman.
He's really dull here.
Joan Taylor, we will see when we get around to watching Apache Woman.
The 2 of them together What's the opposite of lighting the screen on fire? Throwing water over it, dousing it. Yeah, everything kind of stops when it's just the two of them, which is unfortunate. This is a movie where things kind of need to go. And again, a lot of that was repetitive.
Yeah, they needed a way to get a man in there to play the Richard Denning part.
One man against 1,000 women.
And how do you do that? I guess you make him a reverend because then he's
a chaplain at the prison. Yeah.
Right. There's a reason for him to be there.
All the other guards were women. Everyone else was a woman inside the prison. Mm-hmm. Except for, no, there were guards. There were male guards.
They were male guards on the outside when they were doing the gardening and stuff.
But yet, in terms of having one-on-one interaction, that would probably be the only way they could make that plausible. Have him be the chaplain. Which
is unfortunate because, as I said, it makes the movie a little preachy, but I think that might have been a little Lou Rusoff in there too.
Oh, just trying to keep the morality level from sinking too low. That was one of the things that I mentioned in the notes, is that somebody had written in saying that there's nothing to take his kids to because of titles like Girls in Prison. So I'm sure they were aware of how they were being perceived from an industry standpoint. And they were probably trying to keep parents from picketing outside the theaters.
Yeah, and AIP, despite doing a lot of exploitation type pictures, was really, really conservative in their views. So they'd add this piece of morality in there.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a necessity to say, okay, we're doing this, but it's not necessarily the right thing. And we see that throughout the years.
Right. The bad guys are always punished.
Bad guys are always punished. But I mean, let's teach a little religion in here. We saw I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, and there was that part that was cut out of the British version where they're talking about the Bible and quoting the Bible.
They had a Bible quote in Queen of Blood, which we did last week.
And even going further, in the original cut of The Trip, AIP adds that cracked glass view at the end of the film that director Roger Corman didn't approve because
they don't have the courage of their convictions.
James Nicholson and Sam Arkoff needed to make their statement that
don't do drugs, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Obviously that changed over time, and movies weren't afraid to not pull any punches. They didn't feel like they had to shore up their message with something positive and wholesome. So at some point that goes away, but not so far. Not by even the 60s for AIP. All right. Well, I'd like to hear your final grade for Girls in Prison using our good old AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
Well, Girls in Prison is another film that I feel unfortunate that we're rating it on a 3-point scale.
Well, you can always add commentary.
Because some of the performances here, Joan Taylor, I don't think is great. And maybe it's not her, maybe it's her character.
It's her character.
The character of Ann Carson just isn't compelling to lead a movie, and that's what she's asked to do here. And I would knock off points for that. I wouldn't say it's a 5-star movie, but I enjoyed this film. I'm going to give it an A. I think it's worth a watch for sure, but that's because I have to round it up. But besides the Ann Carson character and the length, I don't really have anything to complain about here. I think it's an interesting film for the most part. And the earthquake certainly caught me off guard. That was a nice surprise. And I think especially looking at its age, this movie is 69 years old this year. And you had to put yourself kind of in the times to watch it properly. But I don't think it's that difficult to go back in time and do that. I think it generally holds up as a decent film and an interesting story. And yeah, I'm giving it an A. What are your thoughts?
Well, like you, I've been kind of flip-flopping between A and I. And even as I'm sitting here, I'm not sure what to give it. And I think it's for the same reason that you also had to round up. And my first thought is to kind of round it down because the two main characters, not just Joan Taylor as Anne, but Richard Denning as Reverend Fulton, are so uninteresting and preachy on the Reverend's part and just kind of one note on Anne's part. But I can see Joan Taylor has a lot more in her facial expressions. There's a lot more going on there than she's allowed to say. So I think she's a good actress. I don't think this is a great character. I do love her other cellmates. I think that they really make the movie. A lot of the other characters are verging on annoying. The old lady who played the piano, the matron, I thought she's really cynical, and I understand that. But also there's not much more to her. I wish there had been more to Reverend Fulton. We don't even know his first name. I think if he had a bit more of a backstory, if he was more of a human being rather than just a position, he's just the religious guy, he's just the chaplain with a one-track mind and an inability to listen to the women he's counseling. I think if there's more to him than that, I'd be more invested in not just his character, but in the movie itself. So I think I'm going to round it down just for those reasons. The good stuff's on the side, and the main course is just not that great. So while there's a cool earthquake, which I did like, same as you, and Jenny's a great character, and Dorothy is appropriately creepy, and even Melanee adds life to the film, there's just a lot taking away from it. And a lot of the other touches, like Raymond Hatton's character and Mae Marsh as Grandma, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to add a little levity to the film, but that kind of levity just annoys me. And so putting all that in balance, I think it comes out on the intermediate side. It's just average to me. I can't really call it awesome. So I for me.
One thing we didn't note that was that Laurie Mitchell plays Phyllis in this movie, and we will see her again in Attack of the Puppet People. But she's putting on kind of this New York accent, and not well. I always like putting out the bad accents. I don't know.
She's doing the tough broad.
Gotta go to work.
Yeah, that just seems to be a character type, and that all characters who are that way talk that way.
So she doesn't have much to do here, because I think even little Meg steals the scenes that they share together. But I thought we needed to call her out since we will be seeing her again.
Yeah, I really want to see that movie. I like everything I know about it, and I can't wait to watch it. But this movie, I'm kind of glad to see the back of it.
Well, I'm always glad to put one behind us, because it means we get to put on another one.
Yeah, exactly.
So to find out more about Girls in Prison and other films that we've talked about on the podcast, you can visit our website, aippod.com. There you can find trailers, posters, and more information on the films and other paraphernalia that isn't available on an audio-only podcast. There you can also message us. Let us know your opinions on the films we've talked about. Let us know you disagree with us or agree with us. That would be better. Let us know if we're wrong in our opinion.
Opinions are never wrong, but sometimes they're misinformed.
And you can do all that and more at our website, aippod.com.
Well, I feel the earth a-trembling, so I think it's time to get out of here. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.